Hey, Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves...
Is the WNBA on the brink of committing the biggest financial self-destruction in modern sports history? It sounds dramatic, but when you strip it down to the numbers, the egos involved, and the money sitting untouched on the table, it starts to feel like a slow-motion collapse unfolding in real time. We are watching the most marketable female athlete on the planet, the player who turned college basketball into must-see primetime television, being treated like an inconvenience by the very league she's propping up. And the era of Caitlin Clark quietly absorbing disrespect in the name of growing the game may be coming to an end. A new contender has stepped into the picture, and they aren't dangling charter flights or symbolic gestures. They're offering generational wealth that makes the WNBA salary cap look laughably small. Now, with Stephen A. Smith adding fuel to the fire, it appears the speculation was never just noise. The exit plan is real. The money is international. And if this plays out the way it's heading, the fallout won't just hurt, it will be catastrophic. Let's start with the number that set the internet on fire. $76,000. That's the base salary for the number 1 overall pick in the WNBA draft. And the comparison is staggering. The Denver Nuggets mascot pulls in around $600,000 a year. The man in the costume firing t-shirt cannons makes nearly 10 times what Caitlin Clark earns to be the face of women's basketball. When that number became public, it wasn't just outrage, it was exposure. Fans were furious. Analysts were baffled because it made no business sense. How does a player responsible for millions in ticket sales, merchandise revenue, and television ratings get capped at a salary that wouldn't qualify for a mortgage in some of the cities she plays in? That's not just a bad deal. It feels like calculated disrespect. Enter Stephen A. Smith. Love him or hate him, he understands the business, and he's been yelling that the WNBA is fumbling the bag, calling out the jealousy and gatekeeping aimed at Clark. But now his tone has shifted from criticism to warning. He's no longer saying the league is messing up. He's saying time is running out. When he talks about Clark's market now, it's not about fever jerseys, it's about global disruptors. He's pointing to foreign money, especially from the Middle East, where sports aren't just games but tools for influence, backed by unlimited funds. This isn't paranoia, it's precedent. We've seen it before. LIV Golf didn't negotiate with the PGA, they bought the players, writing checks so massive saying no was impossible, proving money talks and tradition follows. Stephen A. saw it in golf, he's watching it in boxing, and now he's signaling women's basketball is next. Why wouldn't it be? For the cost of one mid-tier NBA bench player, a foreign league could buy an entire WNBA All-Star roster. But for Caitlin Clark to actually walk away, to take $1 million or $5 million to play overseas, something has to push her. Players don't leave legacy leagues just for money if they're happy. And here's where it turns dark. That push isn't coming from her bank account. It's coming from inside the WNBA itself. From locker rooms, from the hardwood, from a league that, since the moment she was drafted, didn't say, welcome, but instead whispered, wait until we get our hands on you. We've all seen the hard fouls, the extra contact, the shots that have nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with sending a message. And the Kennedy Carter incident says it all, a blindside hip check on an inbounds play with zero basketball purpose, a physical assault disguised as a basketball move. And when it happened, the reaction from league veterans wasn't outrage or condemnation. It was applause, a twisted, welcome to the pros moment, even though Stephen A. Smith nailed the truth by saying this is not how you treat the golden goose. You don't haze the player paying for charter flights. You don't physically target the reason millions are finally turning on their TVs, because that kind of hostility creates a perfect storm. And if you're Caitlin Clark getting battered nightly for a 5-figure salary, while veterans quietly resent your spotlight, why would you stay? And while the media tiptoes around it, Jealousy is the elephant in the room, with legends who grinded for decades with little recognition, now watching a 22-year-old walk in and land a Nike signature shoe before logging a single professional minute. And fair or not, that is the reality. Yet, instead of riding her momentum to lift everyone's salaries, there appears to be a collective effort by the old guard to humble her, with Diana Taurasi warning that reality was coming. But the real reality is that Caitlin Clark is an economy by herself. And if the WNBA environment stays toxic, she owes no one. Her endurance, which is exactly the wedge Saudi investors are waiting for, because they don't just offer money, they offer respect. And when Stephen Smith talks about overseas opportunities, he's confirming whispers agents have shared for months, especially after Ice Cube's Big Three put a verified $5 million offer on the table, the first domino proving the market was real. Even as the WNBA tried to spin panic and downplay it, the seed was planted. Clark turned it down to focus on her rookie season and do things the right way. But now, halfway through that season, after absorbing the physical toll and seeing the league's lack of protection, that $5 million or even a $10 million Saudi offer suddenly looks very different, because the Saudi sports strategy is simple. They don't build from scratch. They buy finished products. They want headlines. Imagine a Riyadh All-Star exhibition series where they don't need a full league, just Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and a few other stars. 10 games, treated like queens, $5 million each. Then home, no travel chaos, no commercial flights, no veterans trying to take their heads off. And Stephen A. Smith understands that this model would gut the WNBA, because if Clark walks, the TV deal collapses. Attendance fades, casual viewers drift away, and suddenly all the leverage sits squarely in her hands. But to understand how we got here, you have to understand why the salary cap is so low in the first place, because WNBA defenders will always shout revenue sharing, insisting players earn a percentage of league revenue. And since the league isn't profitable, the pay stays low, which sounds clean and corporate. Yet the uncomfortable reality is that the WNBA has been subsidized by the NBA for nearly 3 decades, effectively a charity project for NBA owners. And Caitlin Clark represents the first real chance the league has ever had to stand on its own financially, the bridge to solvency. But instead of protecting and reinforcing that bridge, the league is allowing it to be set on fire. And that kind of mismanagement is exactly why the Saudi rumors suddenly feel believable, because in business, when you undervalue an asset, someone else eventually buys it, period. And if you look at what a Saudi deal might actually be, it wouldn't resemble a grinded-out season at all, but something closer to a tournament or Super League model like European soccer flirted with: short schedule, massive impact, enormous checks. And for Clark, it solves everything at once: instant financial security, an escape from WNBA jealousy and toxicity, global brand expansion, and a loud message to American sports power brokers that says value your women or lose them, a hypocrisy Stephen A. Smith has been calling out relentlessly, because when NBA stars chase money, they're labeled savvy businessmen. When LeBron jumps teams to maximize his brand, he's a genius. Yet when the conversation turns to Caitlin Clark, there's this strange expectation that she should endure low pay and brutal fouls for the sake of the sisterhood and pay her dues, something Stephen A. flatly rejects as nonsense, declaring the era of blind loyalty over, because if the WNBA can't protect her physically from flagrant fouls or financially from massive market disparity, they forfeit the right to keep her. And while critics point to the NBA rookie scale, it's a false comparison. Yes, Victor Wembanyama earns more because his league generates billions, but the gap is the real issue. His value-to-pay gap still leaves him a multimillionaire overnight, while Clark's gap is the Grand Canyon, millions generated, thousands taken home, a level of exploitation that simply can't last. And Saudi investors see that arbitrage clearly, knowing they can pay her 10 times WNBA money and still profit off the attention she commands, a bargain for them and a windfall for her, even as domestic alternatives like the unrivaled 3-on-3 league launched by Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier promise six-figure salaries and equity, signaling even current players know the system is broken. But sovereign wealth fund money is a different universe, offering retire-for-life cash for one season, which is why Stephen A.'s reporting frames the foreign option as the nuclear button waiting to be pressed, especially when you consider Caitlin Clark as a marketing force, safe, family-friendly, a deep-range sniper with relentless competitiveness. The ideal face for a nation like Saudi Arabia trying to soften its image through sportswashing at its most calculated, with Clark as the ultimate detergent. And while critics will raise valid moral concerns about Saudi human rights, it begs the question of where morality exists. In a league that allows its stars to be hunted and paid less than fast food managers, because when someone is cornered, they don't scrutinize the source of the escape money, they just look for the exit sign, a situation further complicated by racial dynamics Stephen Smith has openly discussed, acknowledging how Clark's race fuels both her marketability and resentment, an uncomfortable truth layered onto a predominantly black league, where the great white hope narrative was placed on her shoulders without consent, intensifying tension and potentially making a neutral global stage feel safer than an American culture war. All while the silence from Commissioner Kathy Engelbert has been deafening, charter flights announced only after public embarrassment, reactionary leadership at its weakest, leaving Stephen A. Smith to both market the stars and deliver the warning telling the league fix this or she's gone. Because if Clark leaves Indiana, fever attendance craters, TV ratings nosedive, casual fans disappear, and the WNBA slides back into a niche money-losing product, leaving veterans who targeted her playing before empty seats again, stunned by where the spotlight went, a textbook case of self-sabotage that Stephen A. sees clearly, watching a league obsessed with fairness and seniority drive away the one person capable of enriching everyone, which brings us back to the shocking single-season Saudi offer hinted at in the title. Shocking because in the NBA a 1 year mega deal barely raises eyebrows, but in the WNBA, where the supermax hovers around $240,000, one offer worth millions would obliterate the pay scale, fracture the union, and spark a labor reckoning as players stare at six-figure contracts with disgust, trapping the league in economic paralysis where they can't match the money and can't afford to lose her, especially when endorsements complicate it further, because Clark's real income comes from Nike, Gatorade, and State Farm, global brands that sell just as easily in Riyadh as Indianapolis, meaning a global tour could actually boost her value, transforming her from an American star into a world icon. And in the age of social media, the idea that she needs the WNBA for exposure is evaporating fast, because Caitlin Clark isn't borrowing exposure anymore. She is